that up for recording. But as you can see, there is nobody's faces or names, so you should be fine. If you have any problem with that, just let me know. Hi, everybody. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Brandy Rosen. And today we're going to just spend a little bit of time talking about classroom management. I know that, across the board, this is just something we're all struggling with so much. And so I wanted to take a little time to share some of the things that I have out there to support teachers in managing their classroom. I just a couple of the business pieces. I am going to keep everybody on mute because it can be a little distracting when we hear background noises. Feel free to use the chat. I will stop a couple times within the presentation just to check on the chat and make sure everything's going okay. And then happy to answer questions at the end to make sure we keep going and the flow keeps going. Okay, let me just, okay, should be good to go, making sure all my pieces are working good on my side. Okay. So, I think what we all know was probably what the most, common thing across, I work with, teachers across the country. And when asked about the most challenging part of teaching, most teachers report dealing with challenging classroom management in the top 3. And that's just the reality of where we are. We have a lot of challenges that are in the classroom these days, and that are not responding to things in the way that they used to. So I think that's where a lot of us are, and we're hoping to find, I'm assuming you're here because we're hoping to find a little bit of, some answers that might change the way we do things. So if you feel the same way, then you're in the right place. Just a quote that I think about when I'm thinking about behavior and classroom management, because a lot of times people will feel like that is like things maybe we shouldn't have to deal with in the classroom. But one of the greatest gifts a teacher can contribute to children is to help them learn to sit when they feel like running, to raise their hand when they feel like talking, to be polite to their neighbor, to stand in line without pushing, and to do their work when they feel like playing. By introducing these skills in the classroom, you're also introducing these skills as a way of living a happy and successful life. So I like to remind myself of that, a lot of what we do, obviously everything we do in the classroom, are things that they're going to take with them as they move through the world. And we know that the academics are that way. We know that they're going to take that with them, but all of these, all of these things that might seem like little things are going to be the things that kind of create the people that they are, which is really cool and amazing. So that's why I'm always really excited about being able to focus on those kinds of things when we are thinking about, teaching kids, because they're really important. Sorry, I'm admitting as I'm going to. Okay, a little bit about me. I've been in education for 30 years as a classroom teacher, a teacher mentor, and a behavior consultant, and a lot more than that. But those are really I think, kind of my focuses as I've moved through. I've been a teacher for many, many years. I've trained teachers across the country and internationally in behavior and classroom management. I consult in classrooms and districts across the country. So I really have, focused my whole career in the area of classroom behavior, classroom management, that kind of area. I've been married for 27 years with 3 grown kids. My last son is leaving for college this year, so that's sad for me, but happy for them. I've lived in California for 27 years, but I grew up in the Midwest, so I feel like that's kind of the core. I have that as the core of who I am a little bit. We have 3 dogs that take a lot of attention and time, and I love them and probably give them more attention than I should. And I've been creating courses for teachers for the last 6 years, as well as providing professional development and district support in the area of behavior and classroom management. So that's just a little bit kind of about me and, where I come from. My years in teaching, were primarily with students with more severe behaviors. That's kind of always where my focus has been. And it really is my passion, and being able to support teachers and help them find ways to deal with behavior and managing their classroom in a way that works for them is really, really what I've been focusing on. Not everything works for everybody, and that's totally okay. So today we're just going to talk about some ideas and some things that might be helpful to you. And I always, sorry, still letting some people in. Um, my uh, something to think about as you listen to this and move through this training is that not everything will feel right to you. Not everything will feel like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I want to do. And that's fine, because there's all different ways to do this. So go ahead and take what works for you, leave what doesn't, and just keep an open mind that maybe something, feels like it wasn't something you've done in the past, but you're willing to do, or you want to give it a try. Yeah, just keeping an open mind is super important when you look at classroom management, because the reality is that for most of us, what has worked in the past isn't working. So we're going to give it give it a new go. Okay, a couple untruths to start with, just some things that are out there and I think do a disservice to teachers. First one, classroom management is easy. It is not easy. People like to say it is. They like to say all you have to do is this. It is not easy. It's hard, and don't feel bad if it feels hard to you, because it is hard. So that's okay. Sorry. All teachers learned everything they need to know in school. This is one of those things that, though I'm sad about this false, it's not true. Most of us got maybe one or two classroom management courses in when we went to school, and that is just about it. And so then we send teachers into the classroom like, here you go. You're just supposed to know how to do all this, which is just really a disservice, because I think that if we compared that to reading, and we just sent teachers in and said, here's a couple classes you took, now go teach kids how to read, it would be hard. We wouldn't be able to do it. And it's the same thing with classroom management. So don't feel like you should have gotten everything that you got in school, because usually we haven't. Another untruth is that all systems are equal. They just aren't. So sometimes I will hear that, it doesn't matter what we do, they're all the same and it all looks the same. They're not, and the way that we put them out there are different, and some are more effective than others. And that is, just the way that these systems work. And what's good for one student is good for all. So as much as we would like to say, like, we're going to put this one system in and it'll always work and it'll always be good for everybody that comes into our classroom, it's just not the case, because sometimes something works for one student and sometimes it doesn't. And so we have to be open to that idea. And along with that, a good system one year will be a good system the next year. It just doesn't always work that way. And I talk to so many teachers right now who are saying, I've always done this way and it's always worked really well, and now it's not working. And I think the reality that most of us are seeing is that what used to work doesn't always work right now. We're seeing a lot more big behaviors. We're seeing just more quantity of behavior. And so what works one year doesn't necessarily work the other. And we all know that, some year you have that, like, perfect magical year where there's just not much, behavior, and you're teaching all year and it feels great and it's amazing. And then some years you don't have that, and you spend a lot of your time dealing with other things than, actually academics and teaching what you'd like to be teaching. So the systems have to adapt as the years adapt. The other thing is that kids come to school knowing how to behave. And I think that this is sometimes really hard for us, is that, our first thing is like, well, if the parents did this, if the parents did that, and that may be the truth. But the reality is that we have the kids that we have, and when they come into the door, there are kids. And so though we would like to be able to have every student that walks through our door have had all the same kind of behavioral support and expectations set for them, it's not the case. And so it is part of what we need to do to be able to teach them to be able to be, like the quote said, to be able to go out in the world and kind of use those skills to be productive human beings. along with the rest of it, that good teachers know classroom management. And I should have put the good teachers in quotes because that's such a, big kind of word. But there's great teachers that don't know or that don't feel confident in their classroom management or that haven't learned everything they need for their classroom management. It doesn't make you a bad teacher if you don't know or if you're not super comfortable with classroom management skills. It just means that that's one area you need to be able to learn more. Teachers there's this expectation of teachers that they are experts in everything. And I think that that's really an interesting kind of way that we've created this profession in that, you're supposed to be able to teach academics. You're supposed to be able to deal with behavior. You're supposed to be able to deal with social emotional. You're supposed to be able to organize. You're supposed to be able to do all these things. And in other fields, that would kind of never be expected. But so there's great teachers, and even if you don't know classroom management, it doesn't mean you're not a good teacher. And then another, kind of one of those untruths that I hear a lot is that, like, if we could just punish them more, we need to do more about, like, disciplining or punishing. And what the truth is about that is that it just doesn't work. And that's what we know. Research shows that it might work in the moment, but it doesn't work for long-term change. And so then that student comes right back into your class and we haven't really changed the behavior. So what I'm going to focus on things that you can do to change the behavior so that as you move through these, constant disruptions, these constant things aren't always interrupting. That is really, our goal. And so by punishing, we might, stop it for a minute, and might stop it for 5 minutes, we might stop it for a day, but long term, we're not going to change that behavior. And that's really what I want to focus on. And then just, I've tried everything. And I know sometimes it feels like that in classroom management. It feels like we've thrown everything at it and it's not working. But I think that today you'll be able to hear maybe some ideas that feel a little bit different, or maybe ways of implementing some of these ideas that are a little bit different than you've done in the past. That's what I hope. And then just kind of a few things to remember. Classroom management is easy. All you have to do is, and as you can see, what do I think about that? This is one of my biggest pet peeves. This is my recommendation. If you ever hear all you have to do is, run away. Run away from whatever that recommendation is, run away from that information, because there is no such thing as all you have to do is. I wish that I could sit here today and tell you that all you have to do is A, B, and C, and you will never have any more problems in your classroom. It's just not true. And it's just not the reality. I wish I could tell you that. I know that everybody wants to hear that, but that's not true. So even though people might tell you that, and it feels good to hear it, I promise you, things aren't going to change the way that you want them to change. So just keep that in mind. It's not easy, and there isn't just one quick fix. So today, we are going to talk about some strategies that might be a little bit different than things that you've heard in the past. Now, remember, this is just a quick, a quick little webinar that's giving you just some information. Again, this is there's going to be a lot of information, and hopefully you can take from it and then move forward with it, but it's not going to have all the answers that you want. Okay, just making sure there wasn't anything in that as we move forward. Okay, super. So we are going to look at some three strategies that might be a little bit different than you really focused on. Not that you haven't heard of this, but that you focused on. So the first strategy is focusing on procedures and engagement. And I know we know this, but just hang with me a little bit and listen how I talk about this, because this is going to be different. By focusing on your procedures and engagement, 60 to 70% of your challenging behaviors will decrease. This is really, really powerful, because though we know that we need to practice our procedures, or that we need to write out our procedures, generally we don't understand at what depth we need to do that, because it makes this is like, if I were to say that there's one magic pill, procedures is going to be the one, because it is just really, really powerful. It ends up making your time in the classroom just so much less stressful, and it allows so much more time for teaching. And then the other one is engagement. And I think people really, really forget about this because in general, you're going to have less behaviors if your kids are more engaged. Now, I know you're probably like, no, duh, right? That's pretty common knowledge. But I don't think we actually look at that very much as we're teaching, because what I see when I go into classrooms a lot is that a lot of the behavior occurs when kids are not engaged in what's happening in the classroom. Now, I am not saying that every day has to be a party and every day has to, have the circus come to town. But I am saying that if we start to look at how we're creating our students' days, that engagement will help really with your classroom management. And so when we're talking about procedures, one of the problems that I see a lot of teachers run into with the procedures is that we don't teach them consistently and we don't teach them systematically. And what I mean by that is that we need to teach procedures for a very long time. I would say almost every classroom management book I've read, which I've read a lot, says practice your procedures for the first 2 weeks. That is a disservice. The idea that everything is going to be learned within the first 2 weeks and that that's the end of it is just generally not true. And it ends up leaving you feeling like you did something wrong. So I'm going to tell you that consistently means we need to be looking at these and practicing for quite a long time until students learn it in a way that they can be independent. Because if they're not, then it just means we're constantly telling them what to do. And so that takes up all of our time, right? And systematically means that we're going to break those skills, the procedures down, and not assume that every student understands what it is that we're expecting from them, because they don't, and they're coming from different backgrounds. So we need to be both consistent and systematic. That's going to be our really, really our most important piece. Procedures should be as clear as possible and broken up into as many separate procedures as necessary. So what I mean by that is that sometimes what I'll see is instead of like clear procedures for entering the room or for asking a question, we see things like, use your first grade behavior or, stop, think, and do, things like that. Those are things that might be able to be used down the line. But first off, we need to break those procedures up into really small steps. And we need to break the procedures up into as many as we need. It doesn't matter, because more is not bad in this situation. And so one of the things I really like to do when I'm working with teachers is I say, write down every single procedure you can think of. Go through your entire day. Write down every single thing you want the kids to know how to do on their own. And then just start breaking those down and teaching them. Now, you're not going to do them all at once, and some you might not need to do, but it's okay to have more procedures, and it's okay to really break those down. Another thing that I see is that sometimes what I see is that the procedures put in place in classrooms are either much too developmentally old for a student or too developmentally low for a student. And I call this the Goldilocks and the Three Bears approach, meaning that they should be both age and developmentally appropriate. What I've noticed a little bit in the last few years is that our kids are coming into school with some developmental delays in kind of these behavioral and learning skills. Primarily, I think because we were out of school for so long and they missed some of those. And so just because in the past, your second grade group may have been able to do something, if developmentally they're not there for this group, then it's okay to take a step back and to look at that a little bit differently, because by just pushing them through, if they're not ready, we're not going to get anywhere. Teaching procedures should be prioritized over academics at the beginning of the school year. And so many times I say this and people are like, I can't possibly do that. That's like, I don't have time. I promise you 100% that this time will pay off, because what happens is we don't spend that time on the front end, and then on the back end, we're chasing behavior all day long. And so we're not teaching. So if we work on those procedures at the beginning of the year, we practice, we reinforce, we practice. That time is that you get that time back. because then you're not chasing those behaviors all year long. And so if, you spend the time teaching students how to transition from one activity to another, then even if it takes you longer than you think you want it to, then after they learn that for the rest of the school year, they've got it. And you're not spending all day like, no, I said, go here, everybody be quiet, everybody turn, da, 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 right? And that takes up too much of your time. So take the time at the beginning is fine. Teaching procedures need to be planned through lesson plans, just like any other content. But let me say before, this like sounds bad, is that I'm not talking about full lesson plans. All I'm talking about is that we need to have a plan for how we're going to teach the procedure, meaning, are we going to model it? Are we going to play a game? Are we going to role play? What are we going to do? And what is that going to look like? When are we going to do that through the day? Again, I'm just touching on a lot of this, and in my I have in my program called Classroom Management Untangled, we go into such depth in the procedure section because I do find it such a critical piece, and with tons of lesson plans and tons of ideas of how to teach this. But it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be easy. It doesn't have to be hard. It just has to be something that you have planned for. And teaching and learning procedures should be fun. What I sometimes see is that you go into classroom and it's very much like, okay, now we're going to do this and everybody pay attention and we're going to practice this. It doesn't have to be like that. It can be super fun. One of my favorite ways to teach procedures is to have the kids act them out, and they act them out the right way and the wrong way, and the kids get to do thumbs up and thumbs down, and it's funny and the kids laugh, and we do it for a couple minutes and then we move right through. So it doesn't have to be dry and boring, and it doesn't have to take a long time. This should not be hours and hours a day, but it should be fun. And if it's fun, they'll have buy-in, they'll get it, and they'll move forward with it. So think about this in a way that doesn't seem like punishment. Again, here's a couple, these are just a couple samples of some of the activities that I have in my membership, but just some ideas that I love that I have found really fun. The procedure race, which I think is really fun. I do this with all my classes, is divide students into teams and create a relay race where each team has to complete a series of classroom procedures correctly. So for example, set up a desk, sharp a pencil, returning materials, and then the first team to complete all the procedure wins. So much fun. The kids have such a blast doing this, and it also gives you a chance to see where are those holes, where are the areas where maybe they don't have that down exactly, so that you can spend some more time teaching it. And then, a similar kind of idea, procedure relay, set up stations around the classroom, each representing a different classroom procedure. Divide students into teams and have them rotate through the stations, practicing and demonstrating the procedures correctly within a set time limit. Again, fun, they love it, they don't complain about doing this, and they're learning without even knowing that they're learning. It's so fun. So many different ways to do this, and really helps move things along in a way that's fun. So I just wanted to tell you, a little bit of a story about the procedure. So one of the teachers that I worked with, Janie, not the real picture of her, don't worry, a first grade teacher, and she was really struggling. She felt like all day she was dealing with behaviors, and to be honest, she really was. And so after going in, what I decided, what I was able to see, because sometimes, when you're in it, we all know this, you don't know what's going on because you're so deep in it that when you have somebody come in, it's so helpful. So I always recommend that is to have, a teacher buddy come in, anybody, and say like, what are you seeing? Because it's really helpful. And so I was able to come in and see. And what I noticed was that the kids did not know the procedures of the classroom. So it wasn't necessarily, big behaviors that she was dealing with. What she was dealing with was just constantly having to tell kids how to do things because they didn't know what the procedures were. They weren't clear, and she hadn't taught them. So, when they were transitioning, she had to deal with everybody running all over the classroom because she hadn't taught that. When people were turning in their paper, they were like touching other people's desks, all of that kind of stuff that just is so distracting when you're trying to teach. So what we did is she used the procedure module in Classroom Management Untangled, And then we went through and we prioritized which procedures were really the most important for her to start with. And she picked 1 or 2 to start with. And then she kept building them, and she scheduled into her day 3 to 5 minutes, and that's it, of teaching with the with the content that she got from the module. And a huge difference. And what that allowed us to do is we then were able to see, okay, these kids, this isn't the problem. Now, we do have some behavior issues, which we're going to deal with differently, but it allowed us to see what was actually going on in the classroom. And she was just like, I cannot believe how much less time I'm chasing kids around. So it was really, really super successful, very happy. And it wasn't extremely time consuming or hard. Okay, strategy number 2. Defining behaviors plus reinforcing the behaviors equals faster behavior change. And this is something that I work with kids and teachers every day on really, really tightening up this skill. And this is not something you're going to master in, 5 minutes of us talking about it, but it's really important to remember. So what I mean by this is the behaviors or the procedures that we want to see, but really talking about behaviors here, we need to define them. And then once we define and teach them, then we need to reinforce that specific behavior. If you do it that way, you will see such fast behavior change as opposed to doing it the ways we've done it in the past. So let's look at that a little bit more. So what do I mean by describing the behavior you want to see? Because I think that can be confusing, because a lot of times we think we are describing that behavior. But let me give you a little, just go into that a little bit more. So one of the programs that I use, which is included in the classroom management program, is called Bite-Size Behavior. It's a full behavior program. And this is the program that I created when I was teaching. And it's what I've used always for figuring out how to manage behavior. And I walk through answering 5 questions for managing the behavior. The first question that you need to ask is, what behavior are you looking to change? Okay, so what is it that's disrupting you? And when we talk about this, it might not be the most. This is not necessarily the same for everybody. So I might walk in and say, "Oh, this is the behavior you should change," and you say, "But that's not really the one that bugs me." So it's like, okay, well, this is up to you. What behavior are you looking to change? That's question number 1. Question number 2 is, when is it happening the most, or when is it the most disruptive? This is so important. You might have a behavior that sometimes is not that disruptive. So for example, maybe the calling out is the behavior that's just, pushing you over the edge. But what you realize is that, like, during free time or during independent work time, it's not that disruptive to you. It doesn't bother you. So if that's the case, we don't need to focus on it then, right? We only need to worry about it when it's happening, that it's the most disruptive. That's what we're looking at when we're looking at when. So the first question is, what behavior do we want to get rid of? The second question is, when is it happening, or when is it most disruptive? The third question is, why is it happening? Again, this is a whole program, a whole system that you can go through that really walks you through how to do this, because it's not as easy as it seems, but it is once you understand how to do it. But the why is just what's driving the student to do it. Is it because they want attention? Is it because they want to get out of something? Why is that happening? And then kind of what I'm talking about today is, what do you want them to do instead? So this is the next question. What do you want them to do instead? This is the behavior that you're going to be teaching. This is the behavior that we need to define and that we need to reinforce. Very, very important. So it's critical that we define and are very clear about what we want them to do. Most of the time, I can tell you 99% of the time when I go in to support teachers, the behavior is not defined as clearly as it needs to be for students to really be able to understand what's expected. Usually this can be incorporated into your rules and procedures. Sometimes it needs to be taught separately as a standalone, and it really can be one of the hardest parts of classroom management for teachers, because it's hard to get our mind around kind of how to do that. But I'm going to show you that in a minute. And then the last piece is, how are you going to teach and reinforce that new behavior? So these are the 5 questions. Going through these 5 questions in the bite-sized behavior program is everything that you need to be able to change behavior. So what I mean, I'm gonna go back because I want to make sure that I touched on this a little bit more. So what I mean by defining the behavior and reinforcing it. So, and I'm going to give you some examples as we move through, but let's say you want the student to raise their hand to ask a question, right? Then maybe that's the specific behavior. And so what I mean by being specific is that we're going to put in 2 to 3 steps of what that looks like. Maybe you raise your hand quietly, you sit, you look towards the teacher, and you wait to be called on. 3 concrete steps that show you exactly what you want. Not general, not kind of the be a good student kind of language, which I always try and stay away from, but really clear. And the reason it's so important is because then when you are teaching it and reinforcing that behavior, they know exactly what to do. So it allows you such an easy way to move through that skill. Oops. Look, you're asking a question, but you forgot to raise your hand. Oops, you're not sitting quietly. Oops, whatever. Or, hey, look at you. You asked me a question and boom, you're sitting there quietly with your hand raised, waiting for me to call on you. That's what I'm looking for. So when we define it that clearly, it makes our lives a lot easier. A couple behavior don'ts before we move in, and I usually am not a don'ts person, but these are some things that I think are really kind of important as we move through. Don't assume students know what to do. We usually do that, right? We assume students come in understanding what to do. And I like to think about it this way too. Even if a student was well behaved in a class the prior year, don't assume that they know what to do in your class because it's a different class. And I compare this to as pretend you're teaching and you go from one school to another and you get to that second school and the, administration says, well, I don't need to tell you anything because you were a teacher at the other school, so you know what to do. But you don't know. You don't know where to park. You don't know what time to get your kids. You don't know where to put your lunch. You don't know any of those kinds of procedures because it's a different school, even though you were in a school before. Same thing for students. Even though they may have been in a classroom before, they weren't in your classroom. So don't assume they know what to do. Don't assume that students know how to do the skill, even if it seems so basic and common, right? Don't assume, because then you know what that does for us, right? So don't assume that they know how to do it. Don't assume that putting it on the board will be enough for them to display the skill. This is not going to work, right? For most kids. Some kids it will, but the kids that it doesn't work for are the kids that are going to be the kids that you have, more problems with. So putting it up on the board is great, but we also need to practice. We need to reinforce. We need to do all those other things. Don't assume that all students will learn the behaviors at the same rate. Just like we know students don't learn to read at the same rate, right? They're not going to learn behaviors at the same rate, and that's okay. Don't assume that even if they can show the behavior one day, that they'll show it again the next day. This can be so frustrating, right? Is that this idea that I know that they know how to do it because they just did it yesterday. But there's a lot of variables that go into that. Maybe they didn't eat breakfast today. Maybe they got in a fight with their parents. Maybe, they got in a fight with their friends or something on the bus happened. So don't assume that just because they can do it one day, that they can do it again the next day. Okay, so like I said about being specific, here's an example of an example of how you might define something, being specific, getting the teacher's attention. Sitting in your seat, your mouth is quiet, your hand is raised until called on. Nothing in that is left up to the imagination, right? Everything in there super clear. You know exactly what it is. So then when you're teaching it, you're teaching exactly these steps. And then when you're reinforcing for this particular skill. So being specific is really critical. Again, in classroom management, I have about 100 of these there for you, but you can switch them and change them because I know that sometimes this is really hard for us to get our mind to do that. And a lot of times we want to put in other skills within it. You know, sit in your seat, keep your mouth quiet, don't bug your friends. Oh, and then if you don't know it, you know, look at it, put all these things in it. If you find that you have more than 3 steps in your skill that you're defining, it probably means that there's another skill within it that you need to teach separately. So we really like to keep it, you know, we have short little attention spans. This is one of my favorite, and this is one of the skills that I teach across pretty much all grade levels, but we just call it different things. But calm body is one of the skills it's really, really great to teach. And here's just an example of what that might look like. Hands and feet to yourself, mouth quiet, body in your assigned area. You can see how that is so clear of what we're looking for. And so when we're referring to it, we can say, oh, Johnny, remember, you want to have a calm body, keep your hands and your feet to yourself. So the language starts to be so repetitive that they understand what you're talking about. So then you get to the point that if you say, hey, you need to have a calm body, they know it's hands and feet to yourself, mouth quiet, body in your assigned area. Again, these are just a few examples of some of the ones that, you know, I've used in the past that are in my program that some of my teachers have worked with. Here's a non-example. Being a good student, first of all, that is not a measurable skill, right? Being a good student, that can mean 1,000 things to 1,000 different kids. Let's stay away from that, stay away from that language. And then the way that this person defined it, and this is one that a teacher that I worked with did, and then we were able to switch it up and make it a lot more effective. Use kind words, because again, that's too general. What are kind words? There's so many different understanding of that. I'll give you a really quick example. There was a kindergarten student that we were working with, and he was cussing all the time. And the teacher kept saying, like, use your kindergarten word, use kind words. And then eventually we sat down to talk to him. And what we found out was that, you know, he had 2 older brothers and they cussed at each other when they played. And that was kind words. So he didn't understand that, like, in kindergarten, you couldn't use that word because when it was home, when they were being friends and funny and playing, they were cussing. So you got to be really clear about what we're looking for. So being a good student, use kind words, be ready with first grade behavior, be a good listener, don't yell out, don't touch other belongings. So a couple problems with this is they're all too general. What does good listener mean? What does that mean to you? What does first grade behavior mean to you? Really defining those. There's a bunch of skills within this. And the other problem is the don'ts. If we put don't yell out, we're leaving open what we want them to do. So instead of the don'ts, we want to instead say, what do we want them to do? And so what I mean by that is, like, if we put don't yell out, then that leaves the whole world of other things for them to do. So, okay, maybe they're not going to yell out, but now they're going to throw a pencil because I didn't say don't throw pencils, right? So instead, you want to keep it what you want them to do, not what you don't want them to do. That'll make a really big difference in your teaching of the skill and for them to understand it. Here's another example, following instructions. Listen until the instructions are completed. Do what you were instructed. If you didn't hear all the instructions, oh, sorry, there's an editing in there, turn to appear. If you still don't know, raise your hand. This was one that was set up by a teacher. Again, they're not all going to look the same because they're what you want to do. So keeping it really clear, really specific makes all the difference. And then moving into reinforcement, one of the most important factors in changing behaviors is connecting a reinforcement system directly to a new behavior or procedure you're teaching. It doesn't need to be fancy or complicated. It just needs to be reinforcing and connected to a specific behavior. I would say if you're going to take one thing from today, that would be connect your reinforcement to a specific behavior that you're trying to change, or a specific procedure, anything. Because if you don't, that reinforcement is sort of wasted. If you do, you're just getting so much bang for your buck. So if you're working with the kids on following instructions, that those kids are earning for following instructions. That's going to be how you get the most change. How you see things happening is much, much faster. The other thing to remember is the 2-week rule, super important. Any new system you put in place needs to be used for at least 2 weeks consistently before you can determine if it's working. Consistently means all the time that you're doing it and that you're doing it for 2 weeks. Sometimes I'll go into a school and it's 2 or 3 weeks into a school year and they'll be like, I've tried everything. If you've tried everything, then you really haven't tried anything because that means you're zipping through things way, way too fast. So 2 weeks is kind of the general rule. Maybe you might, it might take you longer to really figure it out. It might be after the 2 weeks you think, well, some of this is working and some isn't, but it gives you the information you need. Don't run through that too fast. Okay, so now another example of somebody that I had worked with on the behavior piece. And so she was having a lot of behavior. This was a very experienced teacher, and she was just struggling with the behavior demands of today. And she just couldn't believe how she was always the teacher that had the good behavior, and she just didn't have any problems with her behaviors usually. And then over the last 3 or 4 years, it just had gotten so bad. And so she started working with the bite-sized behavior course. I had her go all the way through all of the modules, all of the 5 steps. And she really committed to defining each of her behaviors. And then she was using tickets to reinforce just one behavior at a time until she felt like it had gotten under control. And she said she couldn't believe how those simple changes made just such an improvement in the classroom. She was like, I was ready to leave the classroom, and now I'm just feeling like I can do this because it really is making a difference. And that was such great news for me to hear because, this is an experienced teacher. We don't want to lose our experienced teachers. And I do understand that the behaviors can just be really, really challenging right now. Okay, strategy number 3, and this is one of my favorites, and it is really exciting to be talking about it, and there's so much I have, included in this, but teaching and practicing learning to learn skills is a fun, easy, impactful way to make your classroom run more smoothly. What are learning to learn skills? I'm going to tell you that, because this is something that is really easy to put into the classroom, and we often don't do that very much. A learning to learn skill is any skill that helps students be successful in the classroom. I know that's pretty broad, and I'm not sure, I'll give you more information, but it can be anything that we're talking about. It's, raising your hand, attending to classes, attending to the teacher, disagreeing appropriately, working in a group. There's, I don't know, probably in the membership, we probably work on probably 50 different learning to learn skills. Because there's so many, and you'll just see within your classroom what's important. But it's really those skills that help students be successful in the classroom. What we know from teacher surveys is that very, very rarely, almost never, does a teacher complain about a student who struggles academically. What they complain about is students who don't have these learning to learn skills, that those are the things that cause them problems, that makes them, really disruptive in the classroom. It's not if they're struggling in reading or math, that teachers are comfortable with. So the more that we teach those skills, the more that they can take those and really apply them to being a solid learner, which is what we want. So just some examples: following instructions, attending, working in a group, like I said, problem solving, working independently. Problem solving has been one of my favorite over the last few years because I think that our kids kind of struggled with problem solving and independence a lot during when we had the school shut down. And then when they came back, they just didn't really know how to do a lot by themselves. And that's sort of carried on, and it ends up being really super disruptive in the classroom. So 6 steps for teaching those learning to learn skills are: we want to define what you want to work on, and small groups are really, really good for learning to learn skills. I love to use small groups. I use centers, I use rotations. Again, we're going to break that skill into 3 to 4 steps. That probably looks familiar for you. Determine what time of the day you want to practice. A little bit goes a long way. Again, none of this is hugely time consuming. We want to practice that a lot. Don't feel like you have to rush through it because these skills are really core foundational skills for students. Set up that reinforcement system around the skill. and evaluate progress and make changes based on the group you have. Every group will be different. You'll need to evaluate that. And I'll give you an example of one fun activity that I did with one of my classes is that problem solving was a really big problem, meaning they didn't know what to do if something wasn't the way they expected it to be. And so we gave them just a plain coloring sheet that had an ice cream cone with like different ice cream scoops, and they had to color, the scoops, the colors that they said. Well, we didn't give them the right color crayons. And so the only rule was they couldn't ask the teachers for advice on what to do. And so they had to work through, what do I do? What are we going to do? And the first time they did an activity like that, it was almost 20 minutes before they came up with a solution. And the funny part is that there was crayons all over the classroom that they could have gotten, but it took them a long time to figure out, like, oh, we could get up and go get a different one. Or, one student said, like, they were supposed to color it red and they had an orange, and they're like, well, I'm going to color it orange because that's pretty close. Great. And so we had a lot of opportunity to talk about, well, and so is that the exact right? But you maybe not, but you problem solved. You thought of something you could do to solve that. Super fast, super fun. Kids love it. And it's just really, really a great idea. So an example of breaking down that problem solving: before you do anything, stop and think, consider the options you come up with, try one to see if it works. If it doesn't, try another option. Again, teaching, such fun. And there's no like getting it wrong or getting in trouble or anything like that. Because that's what this is for. So those learning to learn skills are just really, really great to teach. Another, so just some other examples: the material for the problem solving small group, material mix-up challenge, like I said, problem solving partners, where, you give them a problem and they have to solve it together, assignment rescue missions, they have to get something and they have to rescue it from a certain place and they have to figure out how to do it. All those are problem solving. So many ways to embed those within your classroom. Learning to learn small groups has been a game changer in the elementary school that adopted classroom management for all of their teachers in one of the schools that I work with. In the TK through 3, they've seen a 40% decrease in office referrals, and teachers report they're seeing much less disruptive behavior just by running these learning to learn small groups. Because again, these are skills the kids did not have. So the teachers were constantly kind of chasing them around to be able to get them to do the things they needed to do. And so this, kind of changed the whole game for them so that they could really focus. So as kind of a roundup on these skills is we want to focus on procedures and engagement. 60 to 70% of your challenging behaviors will decrease. By defining what behaviors you want to see and reinforcing those, you'll see much faster behavior change. Teaching and practicing learning to learn skills is fun, easy, impactful way for your classroom to run more smoothly. And if I'd like to invite you to work with me in my signature program, Classroom Management Untangled, and really be able to look at some of this stuff in depth. So I'm just going to zip through this a little bit and let you know what's included, so that you can see if this is something that you think would be helpful for you. The teachers that are in it now have found it so helpful. It is not you get the materials, you go at your own pace. There are all kinds of times to interact with me and to interact with others. We get 12 meaningful and usable contents, 12 months. So each month you get, each month there's different content, but there's no rules about when you go through it or what you go through. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. There's 2 live Q&As where we actually jump on calls, and you can ask me questions. You can ask other people questions. They're so fun, and people have so much, they have so much they want to ask. You get 70 easy classroom management tips. And even though I always say, nothing's easy, there are some tricks that you can use to be able to move things kind of quickly. and to help you make some changes that will really show in your classroom fast. I do a live classroom management boot camp. It's a 2-hour boot camp where we walk through really setting up your classroom. And that's if you sign up before July 18th. We'll be holding that on August 1st. If you can't make it, we record it and that goes into your member area. But that's really great. It does like so much of the work for you. You also get a bonus module on dealing with difficult parents and a training on, and that includes resources and things you can do to communicate and to start off on the right foot, but also to manage when those teachers are a little bit more challenging. And then included are some bonuses. You get the full bite-sized behavior course that I talked about, which is, a full standalone course by itself, one of my most popular courses. And you get that. That's a video course. You get lifetime access to that course. You get this really great handbook called When You Have That Kid Playbook, and it's just really to do what to do when you have those really challenging kids. Icebreakers to start the year off that really help with that engagement, tips for working with your school team, building strong relationships. There's so much in this membership. It's my, I love this and I love working with teachers in this way. So the total value of the program is $1,400. I would never in a million years dream of charging teachers anything like that because that's crazy and we're teachers and that's not how I work. So the price for this for a full year is $147, which is an amazing deal. The bite-sized behavior course alone is generally $50. So it really is, it has everything you could need. You go at your own pace. You can come back to it. So these are the modules that are included. And you can see that you might need one module, for a month, and then you might go, oh, you know what? Actually, I need to jump back into something else. So we have self-care and classroom management, which is really, really critical. I encourage everybody that joins to do that right away. Setting up a self-care plan for themselves, setting up your classroom, rules and procedures, teaching behavioral expectation, reinforcement, creating that classroom community, doing the classroom and implementing the boot camp, building positive relationships. All of this goes into what classroom management is, because classroom management is not just behavior management. It includes all of these different pieces. Classroom management is like an umbrella, and under it is all of these different things. How to use engagement. We talked about how important that is. And then what to do when nothing seems to work, because trust me, I know sometimes it feels like we're doing everything and it's not working. So this is a whole module on what to do then. Behavioral traps that we all fall into, how to deal with those, how to watch out for those. And then a whole module, which is such a fun module on teaching those learning to learn skills. Tons of done for you content. You don't have to do anything but print it out. There's procedure posters that are already done for you. So much you can use and you don't have to put it all together. So like I said, you get the bite-sized behavior course fully, you get the classroom management boot camp, got to get to that soon, the parent training bonus module, and then you can really choose your own path through it. Sometimes people like to use this where they're like, I really want to go, I want to focus on starting the year strong. So then I recommend doing modules 2, 3, 4, and 5. Sometimes I want to, somebody wants to deal with really challenging behaviors, then you might want to do the bite-sized behavior course and these other modules. Or you can just go through it today, you can just go through it straight from the beginning. And a lot of new teachers like to do that. So that's my sell on that. If this was interesting and this feels like something that you'd like to get more of, go ahead. The link is in the chat. Here it is for you here as well. You can take a picture of that and just put that into your computer or just cut and paste the chat right up. Let's see. There it is. You can see right there is the link. And all you have to do is cut and paste that and you'll be good to go. And I'm happy to answer any questions after. I'm going to go through here now and see if there's anything that people have questions. Hi. Yeah. So Richard said he was the third classroom teacher when he started in November. No procedures in place by either the first two. Yeah, I imagine that was quite difficult. I also have walked into classrooms like that. That's where, all of this kind of support becomes even more important because it's just a lot. And so Classroom Management Untangled is the name of my course. They said, I think Tracy had asked about a book. Yes, everybody is getting a replay sent. So that's coming into your email. You should get that in a couple hours, and it'll be an email with all this information as well as the replay. So don't worry about it if you miss some of it, or if you want to watch it again, or if you want to share it. Uh, that'll be in your inbox pretty soon. Let's see, be respectful, be responsible, be safe. Sure, those are all really good. We want to make sure, though, that we're defining what that means because that can look really different for different kids. And absolutely, procedures need to be in place across the board, across the school, everywhere that you go. The expectations are going to be, oh, okay, so that's to Tracy. Yeah. And again, within classroom management, all those expectations are there for you. Yep, in middle school, you got to practice every class. You got to break it down each time. Yeah, so this is the referral. Richard brought up that the writing referrals, it just doesn't work. And so that's really where a lot of schools are using this program, is because they're finding that that just doesn't work. It takes up so much time as your teacher. It doesn't work. They come back. Maybe there was a consequence, maybe there wasn't, but even if there was, it doesn't change the behavior. So we really, really, really want to be able to change the behavior in the classroom. Sophia, you bought the bite-sized behavior, and there is a special rate to be able to join classroom management. And I am going to write down your name and send you that link so that you have that, so you can join at a discounted rate, because obviously you won't pay for the whole thing since you already have bite size. I'm going to go ahead and do that. The link is right above you in the chat. Make sure everybody sees that. Scroll up. There it is. Let me copy it again. I'll put it back in the bottom. Okay, and then let's just go down here real quick. Is there a certificate? Yes, thank you for bringing that up. You do get a certificate of completion in your members area, which is where all of this sits, is your members area, and you can use that for PD, and you can share that, with however you need to do that. And oh, thank you for asking about the mastermind. So there is a mastermind that's an additional option for teachers, which is I love this too. It's really fun. We do a mastermind where we meet every single month. We go through one of the modules. I go through, it's like a mini training every single month. And then we also discuss stuff. It's where we, get to share ideas with each other. We do hot seats in the mastermind, where if somebody wants to, put a specific situation that they have in their classroom and then get feedback from everybody. It's just a really special way to connect with us and with each other. And so that's the mastermind, and that's not included in the membership, but it is an additional resource that's offered. So it's really fun and great. And we'll start our first mastermind meeting in August. All right. I think that wraps it up. I think that's all the questions. Please feel free to reach out to me again. Hopefully everybody sees we scrolled up, and that is the link right there. And if you need anything from me, if you can't find the link, just let me know. Again, you're all going to get an email from me that has the link, and again, as well as this training included, embedded for you. So you'll have all access to that as well. There isn't a training certificate for today, Brad, but if you reach out to me, I can put something together and I can send that out for you. And Tracy, thank you so much for being here. Thank you everybody for being here. I really, really appreciate it. I know your time is very, very, very valuable. I hope that you got some good information and I really hope to see you guys inside Classroom Management Untangled. So take care, everybody, and let me know if I can help in any way.